My name is Harper Grace Walker. I'm 30 years old, and I spent my entire childhood trying to be good enough just to be seen by my parents, even once. But for 30 years, I was nothing more than a shadow behind the spotlight of my younger sister, the family's little angel. I graduated college with honors. No one came. I carried debt, built my career from nothing. No one checked in. But then, when my father was dying, they called my name only to ask me to take care of Elisa, the one they had chosen over me for their entire lives. No apology. No moment of reflection. Just one final command, as if I hadn't been hurt at all. And for the first time in my life, I chose silence. But it wasn't surrender. It was the only way I could return everything they'd done with one sentence. I don't need to be chosen to succeed. Alu. If you've ever been called too sensitive, difficult, not good enough, tell me where you're watching this from. Because you're not alone. My story might be yours too. And today, I'm telling it all. I don't remember exactly when I first felt invisible. I just remember that, from a very early age, I learned how to pour my own milk, clean up my dishes, and do my homework without being told. My mom used to say, "We never have to worry about Harper, she's so responsible." It sounded like a compliment until I realized it was an excuse to stop paying attention to me. Elisa, on the other hand, was different. My little sister had soft curls like silk, eyes that always sparkled with tears, and a smile that could melt the whole house. Every time Elisa pouted, every eye turned to her. Every time I cried, I'd hear, "Again? Why are you so sensitive?" I was a good student. I was top of my class starting in 3rd grade. In high school, I was recruited to the city swim team, waking at 5 a.m. to train, staying up late to study. But the medals I brought home were never hung in the living room. Meanwhile, a single photo of Elisa in a dance dress, spinning during rehearsal, was blown up, framed, and hung right next to the dining table. My father once introduced her to friends by saying, "This is my youngest, our little angel Elisa, training at a prestigious dance academy." As for me, he'd just say, "The older one's studying something, design, I think." Every year, Elisa's birthday was an event. The whole family got involved. There were buffets, ballet performances, pastel pink invitations sent to school friends. My birthday. I remember one year, lighting the candles myself on a store-bought cake, eating while solving advanced math problems. Mom was too busy taking Elisa to a costume fitting. I wasn't angry. Just sad. So sad that I once wrote in my diary, "If only I knew how to dance, maybe Mom would have stayed a little longer." I once asked to enroll in industrial arts. I loved drawing, building models, and had even won first prize in a statewide design competition at 15. But when I carefully pitched the idea to my mom, she just frowned. "You should choose something more practical. I don't want you to struggle chasing some dreamy career. Law or business would be better." A few months later, Elisa said she wanted to study dance in New York. No one questioned it. My dad wired $10,000 for her to secure a private studio, and my mom spent hours on the phone looking for the perfect apartment for our darling daughter. I was never called Daddy's girl. I was the rational one, the older sister who should know better, the one who was born to sacrifice. But all those labels only made me feel like a shadow present, but never truly seen. Every time I asked for extra school supplies, they said I was asking for too much. Whenever I proposed a new idea, it was too complicated, too troublesome. But if Elisa wanted a toy, a dress, or simply mentioned Disneyland, they would bend over backwards to make it happen. I remember the first time I truly felt the weight of that difference. I was 17. That day was the college scholarship announcement ceremony. I stood on stage, representing the school as Student of the Year. I looked out into the crowd and saw no one from my family. Later, I found out they had taken Elisa to the state ballet competition in Denver. My mom sent one text, "I know you'll do great, but Elisa's event is important too." And just like that, even in my most defining moments, I was always second to my sister's dance steps. I won't deny that Elisa is talented. She dances beautifully, she has charm, and at times, she can be gentle. But the way people treated her, pampered her, placed her at the center of everything. It pushed me further and further back. I never wanted to compete, I just wanted to be seen even just once. But that never happened. In the family photo hanging in the living room, I'm standing off to the right, forcing a smile, while Elisa is seated in the middle, held tightly by both parents. I used to think it was a small thing. But those small things, over time, turned into a deep, unfillable void. Growing up in a house where every compliment went to someone else, while you had to take care of yourself, is an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. It makes you question yourself whether you're wrong for wanting fairness. Whether you're truly worthy of love or just what's left over after all the affection has been handed out. Later, when I stepped out into the world, I realized one thing. I wasn't angry at Elisa, she was just the chosen one. But I resented how my parents turned love into something conditional, and I had never met those conditions. I didn't want pity, but I also didn't want to be the one forgotten. That's why I left to chase my own dream. No goodbyes, no letter left behind. I simply disappeared the same way they had quietly written me out of the family story. I walked into 4 years of college trying to prove I was worthy not to the world, but to the very people who once called me daughter. I studied day and night, worked part-time at the library, then at a small coffee shop down the street. There were nights when I delivered pizzas while listening to lectures through earbuds, nights when I cried while typing essays in my damp dorm room. I didn't go on spring break, didn't party, didn't buy new shoes. Every dollar was measured carefully because tuition kept rising, and my scholarships weren't enough. Even so, I graduated with honors near perfect GPA, recognized at the award ceremony. I had pictured that day so many times, my family sitting in the crowd, thunderous applause when my name was called, and in that moment, I'd see my mother's proud gaze, my father's softened eyes, and a smile from Elisa. I thought if not for all the years I endured silently, then at least for that day, they would come. A month before the ceremony, I sent an email to the whole family. I attached a map of the auditorium, the exact time, even suggestions for nearby motels. No one replied. I thought maybe they're just busy. 2 weeks before graduation, I followed up with handwritten invitations, carefully addressing each one to my father, my mother, even Elisa. I didn't ask for anything, I just hoped they'd show up. A few days later, I called home. My mother's voice was distant. I'll have to check the schedule, can't promise anything. Then she hung up. Still, I held on to hope. I naively believed that maybe, just maybe, they'd come through at the last minute. Graduation day arrived. The sun was golden and warm. I wore a black gown, square cap, and stepped up the stage slowly amid applause echoing across the hall. When they called my name, Harper Grace Walker, summa cum laude, I turned and looked into the crowd. The front row reserved for family was empty. I didn't see my mother. Didn't see my father. Elisa wasn't there either. Only Aunt Charlotte, the aunt I'd never been close with, stood quietly in the corner, waving with hesitant eyes. I smiled. The kind of smile you wear when you've accomplished something huge, and there's no one there to witness it but yourself. The ceremony ended. Friends hugged their loved ones amidst cheers and flashes from cameras. I stood alone, holding a bouquet I'd bought the day before just in case no one brought one. Aunt Charlotte walked over, gave me a gentle hug, and whispered, "I'm proud of you." I said nothing. I didn't want to cry. But inside me, something had broken quietly. A few days later, I got a message from her. Another attempt at clumsy comfort. "Your parents said they couldn't come because they were taking Elisa to her orientation day for acting school in LA. It was the same day, so they just couldn't make it. I think maybe they were sad too, that they missed your moment." I read and reread that text like a cruel joke. The day I graduated, the day I'd spent my youth striving for, was ranked below a freshman orientation? Orientation day, something that could be rescheduled, done online, or attended solo, was more important than the moment I received my degree after 4 years of sacrifice and exhaustion? I didn't respond. But the next message from Aunt Charlotte drove the final nail into the coffin of my trust. "Oh, Harper, I'm not sure I should even say this, but back in your senior year of high school, your grandfather gave your parents around $40,000 to set aside for your college fund. He said, so the girl won't have to worry, let her focus on her studies. But I don't know if they ever used that money. You should ask your mom, I don't want to get involved." I froze. $40,000 that could have saved me from working 3 jobs. Could have let me study full-time instead of running on fumes. Could have given me the college life I never had. But they said nothing. Never mentioned it. Instead, they told me to be independent, to grow up, and that things were tight at home. I used to believe they just didn't have the means, but the truth was they did. They just chose not to use it for me. I sat in my tiny room, the warm orange of the bedside lamp glowing faintly, holding the degree I'd just earned, the one that should have been a shared pride for the whole family. But in that moment, it felt more like evidence. Proof that I had reached the finish line alone. No cheers, no embrace, no congratulations, just me. And the silence of those who once called themselves family. I couldn't sleep for days after receiving Aunt Charlotte's message. The same questions echoed in my head like a voice bouncing off the walls of an empty room. Where did the $40,000 go? Why didn't they say anything? Had I been lied to all along? I couldn't take it anymore, the feeling of being kept in the dark, of being treated like a stranger in the very house I grew up in. I decided to find out. At first, it was just to get answers. But the more I searched, the clearer one thing became. They had never thought of me, never truly wanted me to know the truth. I wrote an email to my mother, no small talk, no resentment. I simply asked, "Mom, I just found out that Grandpa gave you and Dad $40,000 to be used for my college tuition. I'd like to know how that money was used." I didn't expect an apology. But I did hope for an answer. She replied within 10 minutes, suspiciously fast, and her response was, "You always have a way of blowing things out of proportion. What's done is done, don't dwell on it." I read that line over and over. My eyes stung. Not because she lied, but because she didn't even try to hide it. No explanation, no admission, no denial. Just one clear message: my feelings didn't matter. My hurt, my betrayal was just me being dramatic. They didn't see anything wrong with taking money that was meant for me and using it for something I would never know, or worse, using it for Elisa. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I just sat for a long time in my little apartment, watching the streetlights cast orange streaks across the white wall. I thought about Christmas, the smell of cinnamon cookies baking in the kitchen, the stockings hanging over the fireplace. And I knew I would never go back there again. No more Christmas. No more Thanksgiving. No more Harper sitting at the corner of the table with a gift she wrapped herself because, "You're grown now, you don't need anyone to fuss over you." I deleted my mom's number. Blocked my dad. Sent Elisa's emails straight to spam. No announcements. No letters. No drama. Just a quiet exit, but permanent. From that day forward, I started over. I moved into a smaller apartment to save money. Focused on paying off student loans. Designed my own resume, sent out hundreds of job applications. I didn't tell anyone about my family. On forms under emergency contact, I wrote down the name of a classmate who once helped me through a panic attack in a second-year bathroom stall. I had no one else. But I also didn't need anyone else. You know what? There's a kind of pain even deeper than rejection. It's being treated like a burden for asking for fairness. Being labeled difficult just for wanting to know if you're worth caring about. And when my mother said, "Don't dwell on it," she confirmed it. I was never seen as part of the family. I was just an outsider with responsibilities, but no rights. From that moment, I stopped trying to be loved. I stopped hoping. I stopped being the good daughter. I became Harper, the woman who stands on her own, who doesn't need permission to exist. And maybe the day I cut ties was the day I was truly born. No longer someone's daughter, no longer someone's shadow, just me. Alone. But enough. I don't remember the exact day I paid off my student loans, but I remember how it felt. There were no fireworks. No one to celebrate. Just a quiet Friday afternoon, sitting in front of my computer screen, logging into my bank account, and clicking Final Payment. My balance dropped to nearly zero. But I felt lighter, as if I had just taken off an invisible shackle that had been weighing on my shoulders for years. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, I did it. On my own. Without a single cent from anyone in the family that had abandoned me. In the years that followed, I threw myself into work like I had nothing left to lose. I started as a research assistant at a small startup focused on organic food for the elderly. I arrived earlier than everyone each morning, made coffee for the whole team, read through materials before my boss even handed them out, learned how to analyze markets and optimize formulas. At first, they thought I was the know-it-all type, cold, unapproachable. But over time, it was my precision, attention to detail, and sense of responsibility that earned their trust. Within 2 years, I was promoted to head of product development, then to R&D director. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a voice. Not one that had to shout to be heard, but one strong enough that people listened. I spent hours researching herbs, developing supplement formulas for diabetes and heart health, testing small batches as carefully as if I were caring for a loved one, though in reality, I had no one left to care for. A customer once sent a thank you letter saying our product helped her 86-year-old grandmother eat again. I printed that letter and pinned it to my desk as a reminder. Value doesn't come from family approval, but from what you can give to the world. I moved to Portland in the fall of my 3rd year. The city wasn't too loud, wasn't too cold, just quiet enough for me to start a new life without feeling empty. I rented a small house tucked beside a line of pine trees, with a front porch and a vegetable garden out back. I grew kale, cherry tomatoes, mint, and spent weekends brewing herbal tea, reading books, and walking along the Willamette River. I adopted a brown Labrador named Theo. He loved lying by my feet while I worked, and every morning, he waited for me to open the door so he could run around the garden like the world was his. Each morning, I woke at 6, made a matcha latte, unrolled my yoga mat, and opened my laptop. No one bothered me with questions like, when are you getting married? What's Elisa up to? Or, why don't you go visit home? Here, I wasn't the older daughter, or Elisa's sister, or the moody one. I was just Harper, a woman building her life, step by step, milestone by milestone, and doing it with her bare hands, her mind, and her determination. I started writing my first startup plan on a winter night. I wanted to build a natural supplement brand just for the elderly, something that wasn't just medicine, but part of a humane and healthy lifestyle. I named the project Selah, a Hebrew word that means pause, reflect. Because I believe that elderly people, those who once were the center of their families, deserve a moment to pause, to be heard, to be cared for, instead of being treated as burdens. Maybe because I once was a burden too, and I know exactly how much that hurts. I met new people, none of them asked about my past. An elderly neighbor named Margaret would often bring me apple pie every weekend. She called me the quiet girl with warm eyes. I'd help her look up medications, check her blood pressure, or simply sit and listen to her stories. One day, she told me, "You're a rare kind of person, not talkative, but deep." I didn't know if she was right. All I knew was that in that silence, I had found something I'd always lacked, a life that didn't need to be proven. I also started journaling again for the first time in years. Not to vent, but to document the journey of someone who had once been considered invisible but never stopped fighting to be present. The old wooden scented pages, slanted handwriting, and messy crossouts became proof of a former Harper who had once been in pain and a new Harper who was slowly healing, step by step. I no longer spoke to my family. I didn't call on Thanksgiving, didn't send Christmas cards, didn't follow anyone on social media. Not because I hated them, but because I chose peace. Every time my phone buzzed and it wasn't my mother's or Elisa's name, I exhaled with relief. No more surprise calls filled with blame. No more midnight texts asking for money or reminding me of my duty. I used to be the invisible one. But now, I exist without having to shout. Every day, I look in the mirror and see a woman who is independent, steady, and whole not because she has everything but because she no longer needs anyone else to feel worthy. And the most beautiful part? I owe no one anything. I don't owe anyone recognition. I don't owe anyone conditional love. I don't owe the past. All that's left is the present and me, with everything I've chosen to keep. My life carried on quietly like that until one day I was making tea when the phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number, but something about it made my chest tighten. I picked up. On the other end, a serious woman's voice said, "Is this Harper Grace Walker? I'm calling from Mount Mercy Hospital in Seattle. Your father, Mr. Douglas Walker, is in critical condition. Your name was listed in the emergency contact records." I froze. The name of the man I'd spent nearly a decade trying to forget now echoed like a reopened wound. I paused for a few seconds, then answered, "I'll make arrangements." I hung up, my hands trembling slightly. Not from pain, but because I honestly didn't know what I was feeling. I sat down and held Theo, my dog, always curled up at my feet each morning. He looked up at me with his warm brown eyes, as if waiting for a sign. I sighed. It had been nearly 10 years since I last heard my father's voice. 10 years without a message, a call, not even a birthday or Christmas greeting. Between us was a blank space unfilled by love or warm memories, just a void of everything that was never said. I drove to Seattle the next morning. The familiar road felt like an old, dusty journal. I didn't need to read it again, but I remembered every line. Mount Mercy Hospital sat on a low hill, winter sunlight spilling cold and quiet through the glass windows. I walked into the main lobby with a strange feeling as if I were borrowing someone else's memories. The woman at the reception desk pointed toward the ICU, her eyes studying me like she was trying to decide whether I was really family. I simply nodded. There was nothing left to say. Room 315. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it gently. The sharp scent of antiseptic hit me immediately. My father lay there, frail, his face sunken as if time had drained every ounce of strength that once lived in him. Beside the bed, Elisa sat with her face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling softly. Her hair was neatly tied back, her makeup carefully done, foundation blending smoothly with her skin, lips a pale pink but her eyes were hollow, as if even she didn't know whether she was sad or afraid. I stepped in. The soft sound of my shoes on the floor didn't stir anyone. Elisa looked up. Her eyes met mine like a needle, startled, guilty, and with something that looked almost like hope. But I didn't respond. I just stood there, like a guest who had arrived far too late. My father turned his head toward me. He recognized me instantly, even though his eyes were clouded from illness and medication. He lifted his hand weakly, motioning for me to come closer. I stepped forward, stood beside the bed, and looked down at the face that had once been my blueprint, the same face that hadn't turned to look when I stood alone at my graduation. He tried to speak, his voice raspy like wind scraping against stone. "Harper, you're the most successful one in the family." I said nothing. He went on. "Can you give Elisa a job, a direction? Do it so I can go in peace." I heard every word. They dropped into my ears like tiny needles, piercing the armor I thought I had built around myself. So, after everything, I was still being summoned, not for me, but for my sister. For their little angel. For the one they had chosen to love. I looked at him. Then at Elisa. Then out the window where the pale light spilled across the hospital corridor. Outside, a few children were playing, their laughter drifting in from what felt like another world. I wanted to ask, why? Why did you never once call to ask how I was doing? Why did the $40,000 meant for me disappear without a word? Why do you think I could drop everything, my career, my dreams, my life, just to help your daughter find her path? But I asked nothing. I simply said, "You should rest now." Then I turned and walked out. Elisa chased after me. She grabbed my hand in the hallway, her voice pleading. Please, he doesn't have much time left. You can't turn your back now. I gently pulled my hand away. No anger. No accusation. I just said, you have no idea what I had to do to get here. And you have no idea what I endured every time Mom and Dad chose you, again and again. Elisa said nothing. She didn't cry, but I saw her lips trembling. Maybe it was from the cold, or maybe she finally realized this time I wasn't coming back. I didn't go home that night. I stayed at a small hotel nearby. I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, holding Theo, my dog, who I had brought with me. In my mind were my father's face, his whispering voice, and Elisa's empty eyes. I remembered the times I had begged for just one chance and no one listened. I remembered silent dinners where I was seen as the one who complicates everything, while Elisa only had to smile to light up the table. And now, they needed me. They spoke my name. But not because they missed me. Not because they cared. Only because they had no one else left. I knew if I said yes, I'd fall back into that old cycle. I'd take on the burden again, sacrifice again, drown in the feeling that I had to repay something I never received. And if I said no, they'd call me selfish. They'd say I succeeded but lost my humanity. But I was too tired to keep living by the standards they set for me. I didn't owe them Elisa's future. I didn't owe them forgiveness they never gave me. The next morning, I returned to the hospital. My father was still alive, but weaker. I stood by his bedside, one last time. He turned toward me, trying to focus. I didn't cry. I simply said, I've lived well. And I will continue to live well, but not by carrying anyone else. Then I took his hand, gently squeezed it. Goodbye, Dad. I walked away without looking back. For the first time, I stepped out of the place once called family without feeling anything tying me to it anymore. Not because I was numb, but because I had learned how to choose my own heart before someone else could use it as a tool for their peace of mind. 2 weeks after the funeral, Portland began to cool. The trees lining the streets turned a deep crimson, then slowly shed their leaves in a silent ritual to say goodbye to summer. I was sitting in the kitchen, brewing a pot of peppermint tea, when I heard a knock at the door. Not the usual sound of deliveries. Not a neighbor's knock. It was 3 short, firm, hesitant taps. I walked over and opened the door. Elisa stood there. I didn't know how she'd found me, but in her long beige coat, hair slightly tangled from the wind, eyes swollen from crying, and lips bare of lipstick for the first time since we were girls, I saw her like this. Harper. Her voice trembled. I don't know who else to turn to. I said nothing. I just stepped aside and let her in. My home was as it always was, clean, orderly, filled with the scent of pine and herbal tea, like a soft blanket in the middle of winter. Elisa sat on the couch, wrapping her arms around herself, as if trying to shrink into a world that no longer had a place for her. Jared lied to me, she began, her voice hoarse like someone who'd been holding back tears for days. He wasn't just with me, he was living with another woman. I only found out when she sent a message, calling me the cheap version. Elisa paused, took a deep breath, and continued, each word peeling away what little defense she had left. He's an addict. I didn't know. I truly didn't. It all started when my money kept disappearing. Then one day, he said, if I didn't give him more, he'd leak a private video. One he recorded without me knowing. I wasn't surprised. Jared had always been a red flag to me from the first time I saw his photo on Elisa's Instagram. Handsome in that slick, too polished way, sweet talker with dishonest eyes. I had warned them. I even sent Mom an email clearly outlining my concerns. No one replied. They said I was jealous, that I wouldn't understand, since I'd never had a boyfriend. Elisa even blocked me on social media for a while after I voiced my concern. Now, the man they had all defended, trusted, and idolized had revealed his true face. But no one called to say, you were right. Elisa clenched her fists, then looked up at me. I'm not here to ask for money. I want to start over. I can't go home. Mom still thinks it's all my fault. She doesn't understand. She doesn't want to understand. I've lost everything. Harper, just give me a chance. Let me work with you. I promise I'll learn, I'll try hard, I won't let you down. I looked at her, the one who was once pampered, praised, and paved a red carpet from the living room to every stage. The one cradled as if the whole world spun just for her. Now, she sat in front of me shivering, pale, eyes brimming with tears, like I was the last lifeline in the ocean she was sinking into. I wanted to feel sorry for her, but what I felt was unclear. Not anger. Not resentment. Just a void, like I had waited for this moment for so long that now that it had finally come, I had no feelings left to give it. I stood up, grabbed my laptop, opened the browser, and booked a flight back to Seattle for her. I got you a ticket home, you leave tomorrow night. Elisa looked at me, a flicker of hope in her voice. So, you'll let me work at your company? I closed the laptop, sat back down, and said evenly, My company doesn't hire people who can't take responsibility. Elisa froze. I'm your sister. She nearly shouted, her voice cracking, as if she couldn't believe I'd turned her down so directly. I looked her straight in the eye, my gaze no longer angry, just tired, deeply tired. And who was I in this family for the past 30 years, Elisa? The air in the room suddenly felt heavier, as if winter itself had swept in through the window. She said nothing. Her lips pressed tightly together, eyes brimming with tears, but this time, I didn't look away. I let her see. Let her face the truth that forgiveness doesn't come from tears, it comes from owning your actions. I was no longer the sister waiting for her to call. No longer the daughter yearning for a mother's embrace. I was Harper, a woman who had rewritten the meaning of family after being erased from it too many times. Elisa stayed the night. I set out a small mattress in the living room for her, beside Theo, my dog, who never leaves my side when he senses something heavy in my heart. The next morning, I drove her to the airport. We didn't talk much. On the way, she whispered, I get it now. Maybe I need to learn how to walk alone, the way you once did. I didn't reply. But something in me cracked, not from pain, but like an old shackle breaking apart, piece by piece. That afternoon, I received a message from my mother. Short, no punctuation. I don't want to see you again. I stared at the words on my screen for a few seconds, then turned it off. No reply. No hurt. Just a confirmation of something I'd known for years, but now finally had in writing. I stepped into the kitchen and made a fresh cup of tea. The scent of peppermint filled the room warm and clear, like a reminder that all the doors that once slammed shut on me no longer held me captive. I sat at the table, opened my business plan, and underlined my goals for the next year. Launch a new product, expand to the West Coast, hire more staff, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Not because I had said no to Elisa, but because I had honored my boundaries. I didn't let old pity drag me back into losing myself all over again. Outside the window, the sunset cast long shadows across the stone steps of my porch. Another day was ending. But this time, I didn't feel drained or hollow. I felt at peace. A quiet kind of completeness, one that didn't need recognition, didn't need applause. Because for the first time, I knew I had done the right thing. Right by my heart, right by the woman I had fought so hard to become. I stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and opened the bottom drawer where I kept the things that mattered most. Inside, between business files, a few handwritten notebooks, and an old fountain pen, was the graduation photo I had tucked away long ago. I pulled it out, wiped the thin layer of dust, and looked into my own eyes in the picture. The girl standing on stage with her diploma, rows of empty seats behind her. No claps, no photos. Just her standing alone, tall and proud. I found a frame and hung the photo on the wall across from my desk. Beneath it, I placed a simple wooden chair. Empty. Still empty, like it was that day. But this time, it didn't hurt. This time, it wasn't absence that filled the room, but the full presence of the woman who had stood there, even when no one stood beside her. I returned to my desk. The laptop was still open, the emails still unread. I clicked into my inbox and there it was. The subject line read, "Congratulations, you've been nominated for Forbes 30. Under 30. Public Health." I opened it. The details were clear, specific, and the name was mine. Harper Grace Walker. It was the company I had built, the product I had developed, the community I had served, day in and day out. No referrals, no backing. Just one woman who had been erased from the family picture and chose to paint a new world of her own. I leaned back in my chair. The room went quiet. I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post it online. I just sat there, watching the last light of autumn fade from the sky, and whispered like an affirmation. You don't need to be chosen to succeed. You just need to choose yourself not to disappear. There are dreams that were once laughed at. Promises that were once forgotten. Children who grow up in seemingly complete families, yet the thing they lack the most is love. And if one day you realize you've always been the extra in every family photo, remember this: you are not their mistake. You are living proof of something they didn't have the courage to face. I pulled out an old sticky note from my drawer, the ink faded with time. Pay off student loans, buy first house, be seen for who I am. I underlined the last one, done, not for anyone else, but because I chose myself from the day they didn't. The house was quiet. The tea had gone cold. Theo curled up near the fireplace, breathing softly. I got up, poured myself a fresh glass of water, and returned to my seat, continuing to sketch out the growth plan for Selah, a brand built around the meaning of pause to heal. Maybe no one had ever paused for me, but I would build a place where those who were abandoned could stop and be seen. Because I had learned one truth. Your worth doesn't come from who chooses you. It comes from the moment you are brave enough to choose yourself and never ask for permission to exist. If you've ever been called selfish, a disappointment, a liability, simply for speaking your truth, for refusing to carry responsibilities that were unfairly placed on you, for setting boundaries, then I want you to hear this. You are not wrong. You were never wrong. What was wrong was how they treated you, like you only had value when you were quiet, obedient, and compliant. Maybe you've sat silently at a crowded dinner table, hearing praise handed to someone else while your name was brushed over. Maybe you applied for scholarships on your own, paid tuition with part-time jobs, celebrated birthdays with store-bought cake, and told yourself, "It's fine as long as I keep trying." Maybe you've sent messages, made calls, reached out for love only to be met with neglect, told you're too sensitive, made to feel like a burden. I've been there too. I used to think that if I just studied harder, performed better, asked for less, maybe I would be loved. But what I needed wasn't to be chosen. It was to dare to choose myself, even if others turned away, even if no applause came, even if the world told me to stay in my place. You don't need to scream to be seen. You don't have to drain yourself to hold on to a space in someone's heart. Because sometimes, that space never existed. And you know what the cruelest thing is? When you give your whole heart trying to preserve a family only to realize they only wanted your wallet, your achievements, your obedience, but the real you, your soul, they never truly listened to. But it's from those very cracks that you learn how to heal. You learn how to rise. How to walk away without making noise, without harboring hate. Just quiet enough to step out of the mold they tried to place you in, and strong enough to rebuild a life on your own terms. If you're somewhere along that journey, I see you. Whether you're the college girl working 3 jobs just to afford tuition, the young man called ungrateful by his family for daring to speak the truth, or the woman who just shut the door on her past after one final goodbye text, I want you to know. You are not alone. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not heartless for choosing to walk away. You are not ungrateful for refusing to repay a debt that was never yours to begin with. You are simply learning how to grow honestly and in the healthiest way by being true to yourself. And if anyone has ever made you feel like you're a mistake, a letdown, or never enough, look in the mirror and say softly, I am enough. I am worthy. I don't need to be chosen to succeed. That's not just an empty affirmation, it's the truth. And that truth no one can ever take from you. Comment below, tell me where you're watching this story from. So I know you're here. So you remember that you don't need someone to show up to save you, don't need anyone to validate your existence. You only need yourself. And that is more than enough.